Hello, everyone. Welcome back to life-changing tuition comprehension discussion. Hope these are helping you improve your comprehension skills, your comprehension ability. We'll do what we normally do in that we'll just run through this comprehension today. We'll look at comprehension 11 from the life-changing tuition English workbook. And we'll talk about what the answers could be, some definitions of words, and give some indication on the methods you want to deploy and the kind of reading you want to do to best perform when looking at comprehension, when studying comprehension, improving your skills, your acumen. I'm going to reiterate one point I've made before at the start of this one because it's one of the most crucial. And that is, how important that initial scan, that initial read, the first time you look at the comprehension should be the one that you spend the most time with the comprehension. It should be your most detailed, attentive read that you give it. Picture it, you're in the exam. Do you want to spend a bit more time on that first read through, or do you want to, waste time having to keep going back because you can't remember what was said? Do you want to not remember what was said and because you run out of time just start guessing and lose marks? Or a third option, equally bad, do you want to be low on time and because you're low on time you're panicking and you're flicking back and you're flicking to the answer and you're flicking back again and you can't see where the answer is and then you have to guess anyway? Those three options, what have I just caught my headset on? Those three options, none of them are good, right? Obviously, naturally, you do not want to be in a situation where you have to resort to one of those, sort of unprepared methods of solving comprehension. All of them lack composure, and they are demonstrable of not having paid attention during that first read-through, of not giving it the attention it needs. So take your time, learn the geography of the passage you've been given. You don't need to know it back to front, that would be absurd. But what you should know is where to look when you need to come back to it. If you can't remember it, you can remember, I remember there being something in the third paragraph. I'll take a quick look back at that. Yes. And the only way that you're going to have that understanding of geography is if it was a map, you know where you're going, the directions you need to take, what roads you need to go along. The only way you're going to have that basic grounding knowledge when you come to the questions is by an effective first read. Okay? Really important. Do not waste your time reading it. Focus. I get it, it's different when you're in a class and maybe you're talking to your friends. It's easy to lose focus there, but you shouldn't have an excuse when you're in an exam situation. Don't get bored. Channel your attention into the comprehension. Take the time. Focus. Let's read this one together. So, Matthew insists on puffed sleeves. Matthew was having a bad 10 minutes of it. He had come into the kitchen in the twilight. Now we'll do what we did before, which is where we define some words that could pose an issue together. In the twilight, the dusk, right, the dusk of a cold grey December evening, and had sat down in the wood box corner to take off his heavy boots, unconscious of the fact that Anne and a bevy of her schoolmates. Again, now, when we're talking about definitions of words, you don't recognise them, and I'm not there to help you. A great method for getting to the bottom of what's being said, particularly elusive words, is use the context. The words surrounding this word, what's going on, where in the passage you are. So let's have a look at this. A bevy of her schoolmates. So Anne and some of her schoolmates. A bevy. So perhaps a bevy means, and this is what it means, a large group, a collection. So Anne and a large group, bevy of her schoolmates were having a practice of the Fairy Queen in the sitting room. Presently they came trooping. What does that sound like? It's another great method for figuring out definitions of words that you can't quite scrutinise, you can't quite recognise. Presently they came trooping, trooper, a trooper, like a soldier. They march in. Presently they marched through the hall and out into the kitchen, laughing and chattering gaily. To do something gaily, Gaily, is to do it happily. They did not see Matthew, who shrank bashfully, you might have heard this word before, shrank bashfully back into the shadows. Well, so he doesn't want to be seen. So perhaps to be bashful is to be shy. Shrank bashfully, shyly, back into the shadows beyond the wood box with a boot in one hand and a boot jack in the other, and he watched them shyly, there you go, for the aforesaid 10 minutes, as they put on caps and jackets and talked about the dialogue and the concert. Anne stood among them, bright-eyed and animated as they, but Matthew suddenly became conscious that there was something about her different from her mates. And what worried Matthew was that the difference impressed him as being something that should not exist. Anne had a brighter face and bigger, starrier eyes, and more delicate features than the other. Even shy and observant Matthew had learned to take note of these things. But the difference that disturbed him did not consist in any of these respects. Then in what did it consist? Matthew was haunted by this question long after the girls had gone arm in arm down the long, hard, frozen lane, and Anne had betaken herself to her books. So her friends had left. Anne is... This is another thing. When we've got a bit of writing that is in language that has sort of, of a generation gone by, perhaps, it's phased out of use, we speak in a different way to the way this is written now. It's important, don't rush through it and just go, oh, I don't need to understand it. Yes, you do. Again, this will improve your comprehension geography. If you can properly comprehend exactly what it's saying, take the time to figure out what it means, what it's implying, what it's suggesting, the images, the narratives that are being detailed, you will have a better time. So, he could not refer it to Marilla, who he felt would be quite sure to sniff scornfully. Sniff scornfully. Well, could not refer it to Marilla. Why could he not talk to Marilla about it? Or sniff scornfully. Well, I think to show scorn is to show contempt or dislike. You sort of, you can tell that you're not happy with something if you do it scornfully. Let me highlight that one for you. It's to show contempt. And remark that the only difference he saw between Anne and the other girls was that they sometimes kept their tongues quiet, while Anne never did. You see that that's a scornful remark. It shows a bit of distaste, yeah? Matthew felt would be no great help. He had recourse. To have recourse. A recourse is, think about it here. What is the pipe doing to help him figure out what's different about Anne? It's helping him. A recourse is, it's the use of something, or the object itself being a source of help. The use of something as a source of help. Recourse. He had recourse to his pipe that evening to help him study it out, much to Marilla's disgust. After 2 hours of smoking and hard reflection, you see it's helping him think, Matthew arrived at a solution of his problem. Anne was not dressed like the other girls. The more Matthew thought about the matter, the more he was convinced that Anne never had been dressed like the other girls, never since she had come to Green Gables. Marilla kept her clothes in plain, dark dresses, all made after the same unvarying pattern. If Matthew knew there was such a thing as fashion in dress, it was as much as he did. But he was quite sure that Anne's sleeves did not look at all like the sleeves the other girls wore. He recalled the cluster of little girls he had seen around her that evening, all gay, all happy, in waists of red and blue and pink and white, and he wondered why Marilla always kept her so plainly and soberly gowned. Gowned. A gown. What we're talking about, clothes. Gowned is dressed. And soberly. Well, where have we seen a word that looks like that before? Sober versus drunk. We know the difference between those two. Sober is a lot calmer, isn't it? A lot less excitable. For something to be sober, something soberly, is done in a solemn, or serious, or restrained, or reserved way. It's much calmer, yeah? A restrained way. A solemn way. Kept her dressed so plainly and solemnly. Of course, it must be all right. Marilla knew best. Marilla was bringing her up. Probably some wise, inscrutable motive. For something, if something's inscrutable, it's impossible to understand. Probably some wise, impossible to understand, inscrutable motive was to be served thereby. But surely it would do no harm to let the child have one pretty dress, something like Diana Barry always wore. Matthew decided that he would give her one. That surely could not be objected to as an unwarranted putting in of his all. Christmas was only a fortnight off. A nice new dress might be the very thing for a present. Matthew, with a sigh of satisfaction, put away his pipe and went to bed, while Marilla opened all the doors and aired the house. The very next evening, Matthew betook himself to Carmody to buy the dress, determined to get the worst over and have done with it. It would be, he felt assured, no trifling, If something's trifling, it's unimportant. So it would be no unimportant, which means it is going to be important. An ordeal is something that's quite difficult to get through, right? It's an unpleasant experience. So it would be no trifling ordeal. So this is going to be a serious ordeal instead, right? Yeah. There were some things Matthew could buy and prove himself no mean bargainer, but he knew he would be at the mercy of shopkeepers when it came to buying a girl's dress. So with other things, when he's buying other things, easy. He knows nothing about girls' dresses. The shopkeepers, they might charge him a bit more than he thinks he should be spending. After much cogitation, Matthew resolved to go to Samuel Lawson's store. Much cogitation. So he's pondering. He's like, ooh, where should I go? The shopkeepers are going to be very nice to me. After much cogitation, after much deep thought, Matthew resolved, eventually decided to go to Samuel Lawson's store instead of William Blair's. To be sure, the Cuthberts always had gone to William Blair's. It was almost as much a matter of conscience with them as to attend the Presbyterian church and vote Conservative. But William Blair's two daughters frequently waited on customers there, and Matthew held them in absolute dread. He could contrive. It's to contrive is to bring about. He could bring about dealing with them when he knew exactly what he wanted and could point it out. But in such a matter as this, the dresses that he doesn't know much about, requiring explanation and consultation, so he needs them to help him, Matthew felt that he must be short of a man behind the counter. He's going to trust someone he knows more. So he would go to Lawson's, where Samuel or his son would wait on him. He knows them, he trusts them better. So, let's have a look at our questions now. What had Anne and her grandchildren gathered for? Well, remember, comprehension geography, we know that it talks about that group, that bevy, there we go, that bevy of her schoolmates very early on. So we know we're looking in the first paragraph. Why had they gathered? Unconscious of the fact that Anne and a bevy of schoolmates were having a practice of the Fairy Queen. So, why were they together? To practice the Fairy Queen has to be D. The most simple kind of question that. Find the information, that's your answer. Nothing more complex to it. What question haunted Matthew long after the girls had left? Well, remember, there was something that troubled him, wasn't there? Matthew suddenly became conscious there was something about her different from her mates, Anne. Difference impressed him as being something that should not exist. He's really worried about it. It disturbed him. Right? So what is it that disturbs him? Matthew couldn't understand what made Anne different. He notices that Anne dresses differently, but can't quite remember why, right? Be careful here. Look at this question. Look at question 2. Matthew couldn't understand why Anne dressed differently. Of course. That is somewhat true. We've read the text. We remember him worrying about, well, why is she dressed like that and everyone else is dressed differently to her? But that's not the initial problem. The initial problem is he just knows she looks different and he can't put his finger on it. Then he figures out, oh, she's dressed differently. And then he goes, well, why does she have to? That comes after. You need to have this articulacy of the comprehension as well. You need to be able to understand it bit by bit. You need to know exactly which section is the right answer, or exactly which bit we are looking at. So the answer to this one is C. Question 3. What did Matthew do to try and figure out the answer to his puzzlement? Well, remember, he was a bit confused. You notice how I don't need to look back, by the way, because I paid attention when I was reading it. My geography of the comprehension is really good. What did Matthew do to try and figure out the answer to his puzzlement? Did he talk to Marilla? No. Well, he did watch the girl shyly. Remember, you can get things that look true, but they're not the correct answer. Don't be misled. He watched the girl shyly from the kitchen, yes, but he didn't do that to try and figure out his answer. No. He smoked and reflected. Remember, we spoke about the word cogitated and recourse. He used the pipe as recourse, an object to help him get to something. Yeah? He smoked and reflected upon the matter. I think this one might be C. What disgusted Marilla? Well, let's have a look, shall we? He had recourse to his pipe that evening, much to Marilla's disgust. Is that the pipe, then? Is it the pipe? So is it that Matthew smoking disgusts Marilla? I think so. I think the answer for 4 is D. What solution did Matthew conclude to his problem? So, remember, he's trying to think, what's the problem here? What's the problem here? So, remember, don't get misled. He decided to get Marilla a new pretty dress. Marilla, it's not her he's worried about. Matthew doesn't mind how Marilla dresses. That's none of his business. We're talking about Anne, and we know that Anne dressed differently. These other three are about Marilla. This is the only solution. There you go. Anne dresses differently. There you go. Has to be C for number 5. 6. Why did Matthew believe Marilla had a good reason for dressing Anne the way she did? Well, let's have another look. So, Marilla always kept her so plainly and soberly gowned. Okay, well that's a concern. Of course, it must be alright. Marilla knew best, and Marilla was bringing her up. Probably some wise, inscrutable motive was to be served thereby. So, what is that saying? For number 6, what is that saying? He was aware Marilla knew fashion better, not necessarily. He believed Marilla wanted her to stand out, or not at all. She dresses plainly. She can't stand out dressed like that. He trusted Marilla's judgment in raising Anne. It's Marilla that raises her. Of course, that there must be something he doesn't know, and he trusts that completely. Has to be C. He's clearly not content with the way Anne is dressed, because he wants her to look a bit more colourful. Has to be C. What present did Matthew decide to get Anne for Christmas? Well, why does he go to the shops? To get a nice new dress. 7 has to be D. Why did Matthew decide to go to Samuel Lawson's store instead of William Blair's? Well, listen, think about it. The Cuthberts, no, they're not involved. It's a choice between the two stores, and the Cuthberts is not a shop. They are other customers. He dreaded Cuthberts, again, not involved. So we can get rid of A and B, process of elimination. Get rid of the wrong answers first, get to a correct one. A completely valid method of solving a comprehension. He trusted Samuel and his son. Do we remember having the conversation about how he wants someone he can trust? He wants shopkeepers that won't mess him about, that won't charge him extra. And he doesn't quite trust the Lawson's daughters. But who he does trust, are Samuel and his son. 8 has to be C. What were Cuthbert's traditional shopping preferences? Well, let's have a look at that one. Number 9. Where do we see Cuthbert's? There we go. The Cuthberts always had gone to William Blair's. Well, that's where they shop. So, 9 has to be William Blair's store. D. 10. Why did Matthew consider buying a girl's dress to be a significant ordeal? Yes, so remember, he's really worried, and he was cogitating, saying, oh, I don't trust the Lawson's daughters, and they fill me with dread, and, well, this key line, let's find it again. There are some things Matthew could buy and prove himself no mean bargainer. So, there are some things that he knows quite a bit about, and he can be, he can hold his own, and he can get it for quite cheap. But he knew he would be at the mercy of shopkeepers when he came to buying a girl's dress, because he doesn't know anything about it. The shopkeepers are going to have to guide him here, and that worries him. 10. D. He would be at the shopkeeper's mercy. Yeah? Does that make sense? Let's have a look at these last 4. These are slightly different questions. Answer the following questions about the meaning of the words as they are used in the passage. And we've spoken about some definitions, so we should be able to get this. What does the word inscrutable most likely mean? Let's look at the context. Probably some wise, inscrutable motive was to be served thereby. It's a motive that he doesn't know, and he can't figure out. It's wise, it's clever, and it's inscrutable. He doesn't quite get it. It has to be intelligible, means to understand. Understandable means the same thing. Favourable, a good one. Well, incomprehensible, not understandable. Has to be C for 11. 12, a reference to the passage. What does the word cogitation mean? Where did we find cogitation? After much cogitation, which shop do I go to? What's he doing? He's in deep thought about which shop to go to. After much contemplation, confusion. See how they're trying to trick you out? Confusion is similar. It's not that he's confused, or he's not going, I don't know which shop to go to because I don't understand how shops work. He's not confused. It's more so that he knows exactly what might happen if he goes to one shop. And then, should I go to that one or should I go to that one? He's making a choice. He's thinking. He's contemplating. It has to be D for 12. Question 13. Marilla kept her clothed in plain, dark dresses. Now, adverbs, traditionally, they are adjectives that describe a way a verb is done, but they can also qualify another adjective. So it's not just a dark dress, it's a plain dark dress. That provides more description, doesn't it? It qualifies the word dark. Do you see that? Plain dark dress. Dark dress, that's one thing, but it's a plain dark dress. You qualify the word dark further, you expand it. It's dark in a plain way. So the word here has to be plain. Plain is the adverb. Plain is an adjective onto the word dark. It describes dark further. 14. What type of words are these? Plain, plain. night night, lane lane, spelt differently, different meanings, sound the same. There's only one word for that. Homophones. I hope that one was easy for you. I hope that helps. I hope all of these are helping. See you next time. Thank you.